So I'm just sitting here waiting for it to be 1 o'clock and noodling, and that came up, and I don't know whether I just wrote that or whether I'm dimly remembering a Fountains of Wayne thing, so. Anyway, I like it, but I gotta find a bit better voicing for that E. I mean, without doing a big hand change. Either that or I just need to get my pinky stronger. And I've got an issue with my Stream Deck not changing scenes. Or is it working now? No, so just 1 second. Let me exit and see if I can bring this thing back. Sorry, technical stuff, behind the scenes, boring stuff. Let's see. It's been working flawlessly for weeks, and now it's acting up. All right, so let me do the USB disconnect, reconnect thing. No, I'm not going to insert ads now, YouTube. Thank you very much for playing. Hey, it worked. All right, cool. Now it's working. All right, so I've got little buttons doing my bidding now. All right. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Where were we? Okay. Questions, amp questions, guitar questions, electronics questions. Hey, J.E. Armstrong. Realistic way to learn the electric repair trade. Real meaning in depth from previous school, not wanting to spend more money. I'm the wrong person to ask. I've never had an electronics course in my life. I was an English major and a history minor, and I stumbled into this, and I'm not the person to ask for advice. Maybe ask Brad Webb if he gets on here later, Brad's Guitar Garage. His dad, I think, got into it from the RAF and just raised Brad right. And, well, I don't know if it's RAF or whether Australia had branched off with the Australian Air Force by that point. I guess it's Commonwealth. I guess it would remain relatively royal. I'm not sure how that works. Sorry. Hey, RS, Fender 65 Princeton reissue. Reverb and tremolo stopped working. I've replaced all tubes. Check bias, check foot switch. Yeah, reverb tank. What do I recommend troubleshooting next? Well, in a Princeton, both the originals and the reissues, the reverb and the tremolo have almost nothing in common with each other. They're not sharing any gain stages, any tubes. The tremolo is a bias tremolo. The thing that I would look at first is the only thing that those two circuits have in common on a Princeton is the foot switching. Unlike on other Fender amps with tremolo, on the Princeton and the Champ, the tremolo works if not grounded. The others work when grounded. So if there is a ground fault at the foot switch jack, that could give you no reverb and no tremolo. And that could be a problem with a cable, problem with the foot switch, or if nothing's plugged in and you still have that problem, it could be a fault of the wiring at that switch. Something I would think to check, most of the reissues have two little ceramic disc caps on the foot switch jack from the tip to ground and the ring to ground. Tip is tremolo, ring is reverb. That's nice of them to do it that way. And if either or both of those caps are shorted, or if just the wire leads of those caps were long and that we're touching something, part of the negative, the grounded part of that jack, that they should not, that's what I'd look at first. I'd make sure that nothing is shorting at that jack, whether it's in the physical jack, the wiring, or the cable going to your foot switch or your foot switch. That's the most likely cause, because the rest of the circuits are totally independent of each other. Good luck. Hey, Mark, I saw 2 streams ago, towards the very end, you asked a question. It might have been this question, and I missed it at the time, and I apologize to you for that. The JMI AC15 getting farting distortion, particularly on the vibrato channel, when I play low E notes, even at very low volume. EF86 channel sounds much cleaner. Voltage on the tube. Pin 1. Those all seem within the realm of the expected. Pin 8, I believe, on the tremolo, that's where the tremolo ties into the cathode. So the first thing I would do is I would disconnect the tremolo from the tube, the tremolo circuit from that tube, and see how that is behaving when the tremolo is disconnected, because it could be that the cathode biasing of that stage is being thrown off by a fault in the tremolo. See if you have any difference in the sound of the tube, major difference in the sound of the tube with and without the tremolo connected to the cathode. But you are getting some farting. If you are getting some farting on the amp in general on both channels, and just more exaggerated on the vibrato channel, it's also possible that you have a problem later in the circuit, in the output, and you are just hearing it more on the vibrato channel if it has more low end, though. Yeah, especially the F86 channel has got that bright switch where it goes between a standard, I think 47 or no, I guess it'd be like a 22 or 10 nanofarad coupling cap, and just like a 500 picofarad. I don't recall off the top of my head. If you make sure that you're testing the EF86 channel in the non-bright, because that's going to have the fullest lows, you may have the same amount of distortion on that channel. You just haven't been hearing it because you've had the bright switch on, which is not really bright. It just dumps all the lows. So report back. It happens when it's really quiet, and you're sure it's not a speaker, Mark, because that could be a symptom of a bad voice coil as well, or a fault in a cone. Typically a voice coil for that kind of sound, but make sure you're getting it with different speakers besides just the internal. You don't want to chase your tail changing stuff in the amp if the problem's in the speaker, or vice versa. Wish I had it on the bench. Not that you're not qualified, it's hard to crystal ball everything from here. But I'm always foolish enough to try. Hey, Sash DC, a little humid here in Montreal. It's a lot humid here in Memphis. Today's one of those days when it's not technically all that hot. It's 95 outside. But it's one of those days, it just feels like there's no wind at all. Everything's very still. It's like the atmosphere is heavy and weighs down on you, and there's no air in the air. Definitely not my shop speakers, a JBL E130. Well, disconnect the tremolo from the cathode of that tube. If you look at the schematic, you'll see what I'm talking about, because that's how the tremolo works in that amp. Is it changes the bias of the tube in question, and if that's disconnected, then you're going to have if the problem remains when that's disconnected, then you can isolate it just to those two triodes themselves without dealing with all the stuff in the LFO and all that. But that's what I'd look at first on yours, Mark. It's fun troubleshooting that stuff. Sometimes the scope is your best friend for that. Let's see. Friend of Sash's got a Blackstar Series 104. Just curious to know if Blackstar followed a similar power section topology like their Marshall counterparts. I don't know what's in a Blackstar Series 104. Most Blackstars that I've seen in are combination of very standard stuff and a whole bunch of solid state stuff. It's like having overdrive pedals built into the amp, and they'll use MOSFETs or some kind of FET for a phase inverter rather than using a tube, and that can often sound quite fine. I don't really have a problem with the sound of Blackstars so much that I have a problem with the repairability and built-in obsolescence of Blackstars. This is typically a particularly bad combination of surface mount and through hole, and people say, "Oh, anyone can fix surface mount. You're not a real tech." I'm like, well, yeah, anyone can fix surface mount if the little surface mount component is not surrounded by tall through hole caps that you can't reach to. You know, if you're going to do a surface mount design, have nothing, no Manhattan skylines blocking the way to do the work. You know, consolidate all the through hole stuff over here and all the surface mount stuff over here so you can actually reach the surface mount stuff, and have published schematics. But, you know, like I've said, those amps are designed to last a certain period. If they're in warranty, the authorized repair services don't repair them. They just swap out the board. Once it's out of warranty, it's toast. Any experience with Eastman acoustics? A store near me has some B stock that sound great and seem to be a good deal. Yeah, well, I have the Gibson here right now, and in the living room is my EHD. The Eastmans that I've played have been across the board really fantastic, especially now that they've got a partnership with Bourgeois for some of the higher end models. But just the stock E8D, which is their Sitka top version of an HD28. They also have an Adirondack. I think that's an E20D. Anyway, they're really great in my experience. I liked it. I liked it so much I bought one, and that's about the biggest endorsement I can give. Hey, David James. Thanks, sent to me. Hey, Chris Butler. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Marcus. Is it possible to mod a 40-watt Pro Reverb to break up like a deluxe or not worth it? It's not worth it because you can use an overdrive pedal. But yes, it is possible. I went a little walk there. It's possible, but I wouldn't recommend it. Don't mod a Pro Reverb, which exists to be basically a baby twin and it's barely less loud than a twin, but it has that immediacy. Don't change the thing to be a different thing. When a very light overdrive paired with that will give you the thing that you want, and it is no mods whatsoever. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I love this. I love this Gibson. This, off-axis at a distance is not the ideal miking setup, but you guys get a pretty realistic view of what it sounds like in the room. Hey, PWT, recapping a AC30 H2. So is that an AC30 classic head? Is that the hand-wired or is that the Heritage? Let's see. Pros and cons of Vox's design. Vox's use of smoothing caps in proximity to each preamp tube. All right. Okay, I thought you were asking about the way that Vox often uses the Heritage. I'm sorry, it's the Heritage. Those are terrible. I thought you were asking about Vox's tendency to use a 10 nanofarad cap in parallel with a 20 microfarad cap, which is arguably absolutely fine. Smoothing caps in proximity to each preamp tube, in general, the best way to approach this is you have very local filtering right by each preamp stage. So that's fine. But you've got basically 44 microfarad per stage in each of those positions. I'm not seeing that in a stock amp. It doesn't sound stock at all. And it's a bad idea in a Vox. You don't want to go, especially for the first preamp tube, you don't want to go greater than, the first gain stage, you don't want to go greater than 22. JMI's was 8. For the top boost circuit, JMI was 30, but that's because they had a 30 microfarad cap all around that they were already using for the vibrato channel. You can use another 10 to 22 there just fine. So I would think just put those two both back down to 22 microfarad or even 10 microfarad if you want to get a little bit more feel. A little bit different feel, not more, but it's just a different feel. Hey, Brett. I need to look through the tubes. I saw your text about 10 minutes before I started this stream, and I thought I'll reply to him afterwards about sending me a matched quad, not a matched quad, of EL34s for that super bass of Brett's. But I thought you included some really nice tubes when you dropped off the amp. I have not opened that bag yet because I want to get the amp ready for prime time. So let me look in your bag, and then we'll talk this afternoon. Hey, Christopher Butler. This right here, this is an SE Audio, SE Electronics SE 4100, which has just been fantastic to use. It's a cardioid only because they've got the 4400, which is gives you cardioid, figure 8, and omni. But for this purpose, I just need the cardioid, and it's not as bright as the TLM103s I used to have. It's not as bright as many of the AKG C14s that look similar to this. It's a very nice warm sound, and it's got an incredible, I think the self noise is 9 dB, which for condenser of almost any price range is amazing for a large diaphragm condenser. And it's like $350, so I would choose this over the Neumanns I used to have that I think they're at $1,400 these days. So, hey, Andy, thank you very much. Any tips on reducing the hum from reverb tank to power transformer coupling in a 66 Vox Berkeley tube head? Confirm the issue with the external tank, just the lost cause. Yeah, you're not going to get rid of the hum coupling in a small head combo with reverb, small head with reverb. It's a bad idea. You can chase your tail all you want. You might, if there's physical space, you might be able to get away with going to a horizontally mounted tank like you'd find in a JCM 900. But I don't know whether you actually have space for that in a Berkeley. There's a reason that if you look at a Fender Bandmaster head, it's like this tall. And then if you look at a Bandmaster reverb head, it's like this tall because they needed that extra distance from the power transformer to the reverb. That's why a Bandmaster reverb head is huge and the Bandmaster head is normal dimensions. This thing has really affected Dr. Z as well. All the Dr. Z Maz amps with reverb, if you get the combo version, not the head, because the head version, there's just no way to get the hum, to make the hum go away. And people will be like, well, you just put some mu metal in. Well, you don't just put mu metal in. Mu metal is very heavy, very expensive, very difficult to work with, and doesn't really do all that it's claimed in every application. And I think you'd still have some hum. That physical distance is just a free, better option for. To the point where, if you really need to have reverb with your 66 Vox Berkeley, make a little bitty box just to carry the tank around in. So you have a little box, maybe with Tolex and a handle, make it cosmetically match the Vox, put the reverb tank in there, and have some RCA cables. Get some nice metal ones if you want, or the metal braided, or you can just get any standard RCA cables to go from the head to the reverb box, and just get 3 to 4 feet of distance, and voila. That'd probably be cheaper than mu metal. Hey, DMC 9300. I've mentioned elevated heater supplies before, but do I have any thoughts on other methods Merlin recommends, such as the humdinger or even just the resistor to ground? Usually I do, if I were designing an amp from the ground up, I would either have DC elevation or a full DC heater. But when I'm retrofitting or correcting amps, I try to do as little as possible. Like on this Super Bass, I'm pretty sure that once I I lift the physical center tap for the filament supply and put in the 200 ohm resistors to ground from pins 2 and 7 to pin 8 on the output tubes, that we're going to have a quiet heater supply. Sometimes, like in that high watt DR103 I had about 6 months ago, I had to imbalance that because the windings of the transformer were not perfect. And don't tell Partridge I said that, but that's just reality. So I found what ratio, using I think I had a 2 watt 500 ohm pot, and I found the ratio that found the null. Then I replicated that with 2 fixed resistors, because you don't want to send out a pot in the world that someone say, what's this do? And then the amp never sounds good again. Plus, pots can fail, whereas resistors rarely do. But there have been times, particularly on 2203s and 2204s and later Marshalls with higher gain, where there's an unbypassed cathode, like the 10K in a 2203, 2204, where the only way to get rid of the heater noise was to do either a full DC heater, which is increasingly possible with the little switch mode supplies these days, or what I typically do is just a elevated supply, because it takes 2 resistors and 1 cap, and I can usually put it on a little terminal board mounted to the PCB down at the end, where sometimes they would have different, they'd have empty holes in the PCB to the left of the rectification on a 2203, 2204. So just, number 6 screw, put a little terminal strip there, artificial center tap referencing, to that, and then you'd have just make a voltage divider tying it off the phase inverter node with a 10 microfarad 160 volt cap, and all of a sudden I can dial that into 50 to 75 volts DC, and perfect. So that's what I typically do. For anyone wondering what DMC is referencing, I get asked questions beyond the scope of these streams quite a bit, and Merlin Blencowe there at valvewizard.co.uk has a lot of this information in detail on his website, and he also sells really great books that he's written on such things. So when DMC was asking about Merlin's methods Merlin mentions, so let me try that one more time, just a sec. I didn't know there was going to be a test. But when DMC 9300 says other methods Merlin mentions, there it was. I speak English very good. I learned it from a book. Hey, Niall. Would like to change out the speakers on a Fender 59 Basement LCD 4x10, 45 watt for 2x12 Celestion Creambacks. Don't. Because changing the baffle on that thing would just be a nightmare. What you should do instead is you need a 1/4 inch to RCA adapter. Just unplug the 4 speakers from the RCA plugs inside the amp. Plug the RCA to 1/4 inch adapter so you can run to an external cab and get an external 2x12. So you just use that as a great big head to drive any 2x12 you want, and then you can always put it back to the 4x10, because you would miss the sound of that 4x10. The 4x10 setup in a Bassman or a Super Reverb has a very unique low-end thing, especially for a Strat. It just gets really liquidy, and it's a glorious, wonderful thing, and you don't get that the same way from a 2x12. So don't lose the 4x10 option. Just give yourself an additional 2x12 option for the cost of a 2x12, 2 speakers, and a 1/4 inch to RCA adapter. Much easier than changing out the baffle on a Bassman. Hey, Andre. Thank you very much. Needs a new speaker for a 1x12 cab to use with his Friedman run at 50. Already have a Celestion V-Type and an Electro Voice. Think Landau, Hendrick tones with a little more hair. Cheers from Brazil. Mike Landau, most of what you hear from him is a vintage 30, but it would have been an older, made in the UK vintage 30. And I don't know what's going to be the best option in Brazil. If you were in the United States, I'd say either track down an old made in the UK vintage 30 or get a warehouse veteran 30. A similar kind of thing, I think, more towards the Hendrix than the Landau, would be either a Celestion Creamback 65, an M65, an old one, would be more expensive, or the warehouse ET65. Now, most of the videos on my channel, if I'm not miking the speakers that come with an amp, but if you either see me miking that just the kind of generic looking black 2x12 here, or I'm just saying that I'm using my shop cab, that is the ET65 Veteran 30 combo in the room. But I put the mic on the ET65, and that's kind of does that thing. Those are the speakers that I would suggest, but I don't know which of them is going to be the best purchasing option from Brazil. So, obrigado for being here, man. I have no thoughts on the Laurel Canyon. Sorry, Chester. In general, I think Matchless tend to make good amps, but I think they tend to be overbuilt and have unnecessary flaws. They make mistakes that don't make any sense to me to make in the first place, and they have inevitable long-term consequences. And then when I point these out to Matchless owners, they say, well, that's just part of the charm. Wait, the fact that it sets itself on fire and breaks its own face panels from heat? Yeah, man. It's a patina, So one man's character is another man's bad design. I don't know. but I have not had any experience with the Laurel Canyon. Maybe they got everything right on that model. Hey, Joe. I have talked about this linear and audio pots for guitar, which volume or tone. Unless you're playing jazz, you want audio for both. If you're playing jazz, you may want linear for volume and audio for tone. You always want to have audio for tone. All right, here's an SG. Here are the tone pots. Right now, most of the big change on the tone is happening between 5 and 0. 5 and 0. And then subtle changes from 5 to 8, and then very little difference between 8 and 10. That's just how tone circuits work in general on guitars. And depending on how bright your amp is and how bright the speakers are, you may hear more of a difference between 10 and 8. But you hear a pretty good difference between 8 and 5, and then from 5 to that down at 0 is just Charlie Brown adults so 5 to 0 is that big range we kind of play with when we're really doing tone stuff. But if you have, that's with an audio taper pot. If you have a linear taper pot, all the big change is between 0 and 1. So that's the big change. And then between 1 and 2, subtle range from 2 to 10, there's almost nothing. So it's really not very useful to have a linear tone pot. As far as volumes go, if you're playing a jazz gig and you just want to bring the volume down a little bit and your amp is set very clean and you're just controlling your stage volume, then linear, you'll be playing between 5 and 10 and just getting a very linear, predictable response. 5 to 10, no drastic drop in volume, just subtle little changes, and the sound doesn't change out of the amp very much. But if you're playing rock, country, blues, you can set your amp so it's breaking up and dirty when it's on 10, and you roll back to 4, and the amp cleans up. And while you don't get a big volume change between 4 and 10, you get breakup change. It's like channel changing on the amp, and below, you get a nice roll-off sweep. But I can be playing and doing Allman Brothers and like really burning on a lead on 10. Not me, I don't play that well. But if Dwayne Allman were to be here and he'd want to go to a solo on 10, then he'd do a rhythm part on 7, then he'd go down and do a clean fluty kind of thing about 3, and the amp volume is changing like this because the amp's already compressing right here. So the amp's only changing this much in volume, but here it's clean and here it's overdriven. And so that's the trick that the audio taper pot gives you. Whereas if you have linear taper on this, then all of a sudden, what was happening at 8 is now happening at 5. So you've got a big drop off, into a dirty amp. Actually, I got that backwards. It go from nothing to really loud real fast. So it's hard to wing this. There's a channel, Ann Arbor Guitars, and let me get a link and put this in the chat, who goes into all this very well and demonstrates it better than I just did. And he's got charts and graphs and all kinds of good things. And it's David, I'm trying to remember his last name. Collins, David Collins. All right. Let me go to David Collins and see if I can find the video in question. Trouble with David Collins is he's got so many videos. It's hard to find the one question. All right. Let's go to link this one. Here we go. Let's see. Share. Yes, I want to copy. Thank you. Minimize this. All right, here you go. Go watch David Collins on this subject after my stream, though, please. Hey, Green Balls FX. Thanks very much, Gary. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Yeah, Mark, I'd like to help you get to the bottom of that, but it's hard to do more than sweeping generalities here. Hey, Diedrich, I've got a 763 on the bench. Did all the usual stuff. I still have a hum. How much does hanging an extra cap on the bias pot wiper make? Still need to check the board for leakage. Hey, okay. Hey, Rian. It can be the last little nail in the hum coffin. It's usually not the silver bullet that goes from a lot of hum to no hum. It usually goes from, hey, there's still a little bit of hum in the background to it's totally quiet. So I would check the board for leakage, and I would make sure that all my grounds are good. You know, it's easy to try it first. It will never make it worse. It can only help. Just don't hang all your hopes on that. You got to get all the fundamentals before that's the last, the chef's kiss. Hey, Chester, thanks for doing it again with the question marks. Yeah, I'm supposed to talk about this. For those who are new here, please do put question marks before your questions. Makes them stand out in the chat. I'm more likely to see them. And please only ask any question once. You can ask multiple questions, but please only ask one question the one time, because otherwise I'll see it, and then later I'll see it again, and I think, did I hit the wrong button? Did I scroll? Did I get lost in the chat? It throws me off. I'm not one of those channels that has a producer handing me stuff here. I've got all the balls up in the air at the same time, so to speak. Hey, Steve, any thoughts on the reliability and the quality of a 10-year-old Marshall JVM50 1x12 combo? One available locally for about $700. They're not great, but they're not anything that I'd specifically steer you away from. And compared to some of the stuff that they're making today, it's almost a classic era. The JVM's a pretty cool amp for what it is. $700 seems right at the high end of the reasonable range to me, but I don't keep up with that kind of thing, and I'm not ever going to be in the market for that amp, so it might be a steal. I would not specifically tell you to avoid that model, but I would never send someone out to get that model specifically as that's the one you want. Yeah, 95. That's where I'm at, man. Yeah. Yeah, man, that's the whole thing good. And like on some of the Club 40Cs or whatever, I can't get in there with tweezers. I can't get in there with the hot air thing. I can't even get in there with some of the solder quick stuff, unless I were to remove the electrolytic caps that are surrounding it so I have access, because I cannot get a tool this size into an opening this size at the right angle because the thing's blocking the way. And so you got to remove 10 electrolytic caps, and those boards are not meant to be soldered on repeatedly. It's not like a PCB from 15 years ago that was designed to have rework done. They're not designed for rework. They're designed to be replaced by the factory. Cheap to make, cheap to change out, not designed for rework. Oh man, it is radiation vibe a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's major scale, but yeah. Yeah, I loved Adam Schlesinger. That hit me hard when we lost him to COVID. Yeah, that's what it is. I don't think it goes to the E there, but I have to hear it back. Come on, what's wrong? Radiation vibe. I'm grooving on. I'm old. I'm glad we're all old together. Don't it make you want to get some sun? Shine on, shine on, shine on. Sorry, guys. You got me going. Talking about a bad dream on a couch. Hey, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Studio Project C1s are pretty cool. I remember those. I don't know that I would benefit from spending more money on these things because I have no sound treatment here. I've got some light blocking curtains there, and the ones that are drawn there, and then that one there, another one there. So I have some slight acoustic dampening from those, but I've got flat reflective surfaces everywhere, metal things, chassis everywhere. So I don't need to throw any more money on a mic because the room sounds like what it sounds like, you know. Do I know much about the Garnet Herzog units? No. Never heard of them before. About every streamer, so I get asked about Garnet amps. I've never seen a single Garnet amp. They're just, you know, I'm not in Canada. I would be willing to look at one. I'd be interested in looking at one. I expect to see great things, but I've never had one. Looking for recommendations. A 6v6 power amp, basically one deluxe Reverb power section for stereo wet effects from an effects loop for a second cab. You're not going to find that very often because the power amp makers for two power amps fell into two camps. A little 20 watts using EL84s for a cheap thing for people to have, and then they were all racing to have the biggest, cleanest, and so you're looking at 6L6s, if not 6550s. Your best bet, though, is just to get one that uses 6L6s that has an acceptable master volume and turn it down to like 1 o'clock, and there you go. That's comparable-ish to one that would have been existing with 6v6s. The other option would be to get the, in terms of new things, the power station that Steve, the power station. I had one in, it was great. It also works as a little 100-watt power section. Freyet, thank you, Dustin. Steve Freyet. The Freyet power station would be a great option because it has a very good attenuation built into it. So you could have that at any level that you want and know that it's going to sound great. But that's a new unit. I think they're like $1,400. You might just find something 10 years old for $400 that sounds fine because you're just using it for a power amp, and just keep the volume down a bit. Why are words gone when I need them in front of people, but they're there all the rest of the time? You know, just it's anyway. Any upgrades I'd recommend for a Marshall JCM800 dual reverb from the 90s? No. Well, not in terms of making the sound different. In terms of making them better, yes. In the JCM900s, like on the 4100s, and I'm not sure which model you're talking about there, the 50-watt dual reverb, they have, they derive their bias supply from the HT supply, and they use a little cap there that's just barely rated for the AC that's on there, and that often fails. So I often bump up that to a higher rated X-class cap, and I want to get something that's going to handle more AC voltage than is actually present, because they're right skating on the edge there. And the box caps, the output box caps, the 400 volt, 22 microfarads they use in the phase inverter, also often fail. I think it tied into the bias issues that those can have. So I will change those out for some 630 volt rated. Typically I use the WEMAs, not the polypropylene, but the other one, MKS, I think it is. I'm not sure. Though it almost doesn't matter which type you use in that section, as long as it's 630 volts. And some of the JCM 900s that era use little bridge rectifiers that like to burn the boards, and so I will replace all the bridge rectifiers in those models on site, and with new ones, exact same thing, mounted off the board by that much, because it's right on the board, and they cook the board and they cook the traces. Just half-inch of airflow with the longer leads, so the leads dissipate more heat. The airspace prolongs everything. So those are the upgrades, but they're not anything that changed the way the amp sounds. It just is going to keep sounding like that longer. And I'm talking $10 in parts total and about an hour and a half of labor. So I think it can be worthwhile on those. Hey, Daniel James, not sure what the question there is. Quit springs in the combo. I run a Bella non-reverb combo, run a Delverb in the loop. I'm really interested in buying or building a tank because analogs. Okay. It's not a question. Okay. Well, I think you're on the right track. Hey, Martin. It absolutely is a Faulty Towers reference. It's one of the. Every time I would go Faulty Towers, I think, is this the day I get canceled? Because people lose the context and the intent. And the thing about Faulty Towers is, as cruel as it could be, it never really punched down. You know, it was almost all was aimed at Basil. So, hey, Marianne Dell, you heard me say a Pro Reverb is a baby twin. My husband of 64 years is a pedal steel player and uses a twin. Lately, he's complaining how heavy the amp is. Do I mean the single channel model? No, I mean the new single channel 40 Pro Reverb 40 watt Pro Reverb is not actually a Pro Reverb historically. It's a single channel 40 watt 1x12 version of a Fender with reverb and tremolo. The old Pro Reverb is literally a twin reverb that's about an inch less wide. Only has two 6L6s. Other than that, it is still a beast, and it's really heavy and it's crazy. If your husband is complaining how heavy the amp is, what's the best way to put this? If it's your husband of 64 years, and he's been playing pedal steel through a twin all these years, and it's too heavy. If you still need to get out and move that amp and move that twin, that is an awful lot for anyone, even someone who's much younger. You might consider other amps. I think maybe that would be an ideal case, especially for pedal steel, where there's not you're not pushing the amp, you're just getting a big clean sound. The various Fender Tone Masters or other digital modelers might be a great option to give a big clean sound that would weigh a fraction of what a twin would weigh. But that's not a decision I can make for him. He may play one and say it's good, but it's not it's not the sound I like. I have the sound I like. So without being ageist, I think at some point the weight becomes untenable for many people for a twin reverb or anything like that. So, and like Terrence is saying, maybe just Tone X or the Helix and into some really nice speakers. If you're not playing out and you don't have to lug that thing around, there's so many ways to get nice clean sounds these days without having an 85 watt, 140 dB, almost 100 pound thing to carry around. But I would not recommend the new Pro Reverb. It's okay, but it's not any replacement for a twin. Hey, David. Hola. I have an old orange Mad Amp clone made in the 70s with 47 nanofarad 400 volt mustards and the phase inverter reaching 70 nanofarad. Time to change those out. Well, you could. I'm not sure what's the best option in Spain. What I would use in an amp where I was replacing orange drops, so I wanted to use 630 volts because 400 volt caps do in fact fail, especially as modern wall voltage increases. I like the Vishay MKT 1813. That's MKT 1813 series, and those come in all the values that the old mustards come in, and you can get them at 400 volt or 630 volts. And I know that they're available from Farnell in the UK, and I know that they're available from different distributors in the United States. I'm not sure who in Spain is their distributor, but Vishay is going to have a European presence. So the Vishay MKT 1813s are a very nice replacement. You could also use Sozos or Synergy caps if you have a source for those. You could use various orange drops, whether polyester or polypropylene, which would not be physically ideal for an axial layout because those are radial caps and they often do funky things when you bend the leads like that. But that is an option. But my first choice in your situation would be the MKT 1813s because they're going to sound identical to a good sounding Philips mustard. Yeah, vintage 30s are rated for 60 watts. Sometimes they're closer to 65 watts, but you can safely consider it a 60 watt. I don't remember why it was called a vintage 30, but they're not 30 watt speakers. They're 60 watts. Ooh, bad rectifier diodes. Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things I've tried to show in a video. I've not been able to show in a video yet. Someday it will. Sometimes the multimeter says, hey, this diode should be good because the multimeter is not testing with several hundred volts. The multimeter is testing with whatever voltage the multimeter can supply, typically like 1 volt or less. So you can have a component that measures fine when not in active use, but as soon as you put some serious power through it, bad things happen. I'm glad you found the solution for you, and I'm really glad the solution was some new diodes and not a new transformer, because diodes is cheap, y'all. Hey, Chris. Yeah, I really like those videos. It's not just because he agrees with me, but it's nice when someone agrees with me and goes to such great lengths to prove that I am in fact right. I hope, for those of you new to this, I hope that my sense of humor comes across and that I'll say things like that just sound so crazy egotistical, and I do not mean them that at all. I mean it as self-mockery. I will say things very controversial that I absolutely 100 fact always mean entirely and will stand behind them. But it's hard to translate a sense of humor across the internet, and especially in different cultures and countries. Have I worked on the Roland JC120? Sadly, yes, I have. Or the GK 250 ML series? Yeah. I think the GK is a better amp in a lot of ways, but there are better amps than both of them now, especially the modeling stuff. JC120, it was phenomenal when it came out. But ask yourself, is it 1978? Do you have flybacks? Do you have bell bottoms? Do you have a little Coke spoon? If so, are you holding out on the rest of us? Is not that great an amp. It was that groundbreaking of an amp in 1978, but there are other amps that have chorus now, and some of these amps, you can control the rate and speed and depth of the chorus. It's not all or nothing, and it's not just on one speaker. You can have a solid state clean amp that doesn't go all the time, or sound horrible as soon as you turn it up. Now, every time I say this, someone's going to say Albert King used a JC120 in the end of his life, and he did. He used the distortion of a JC120 on stage, and I heard him play several times in the last years of his life. He sounded terrible. Albert King sounded awful playing Lucy into a JC120 with its built-in overdrive. But no one was going to tell that man that he sounded terrible because he'd tear your head off. I'm a big guy. I shook his hand, my hand disappeared. Nobody was going to tell Mr. King that he sounded like ass. But he sounded like ass, and he didn't care. He just wanted to get paid. He showed up, do the thing with his pickup band and get paid, and then go and do off the things he wanted to do. And that's just the way life works. So sorry to go on that sidetrack, but people always say, as soon as I say the JC120 sound has a horrible overdrive, breaks up awful. Yes, Fantastic Records were done with that. Have you ever played a Rockman? Fantastic Records were done with that, but the Rockman sound is actually not very good, and you can replicate that with lots of other products these days. So there's a time and a place for nostalgia. And just a second. Are we losing our internet? No, just Google did a weird timeout thing. I don't want you to insert ads for me. God dang it. Sorry. I've got the main window open here with all my controls for this program that I'm streaming, and I've got the stream chat here that I see things in the order they came in, and then I've got a window, the pop-out chat in real time, showing me the stuff as they come in, and then to the left of that I've got some controls for the stream. So I've got all this stuff happening, and both of the Chrome windows for the live stuff and the stats and all went blank at the same time, like I lost my internet connection. Anyway, of those, I would rather have the GK 250ML because it has a cool sounding distortion, and I think it's just as cool a clean chorus sound as the Roland, but it's a lot less noisy, and I think it's better built. The JC120 is essentially built like a Boss overdrive pedal, including all the faults of that. Plus, they have like 30 different versions, and they all have different serious flaws. I have talked about board swapping for less expensive amps. Where do I find these boards? I don't know that I have. Most inexpensive amps, there are no boards you can swap in for them, because I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing there. I have not ever done that on the channel to best of my knowledge. Hey DK, picked up the AC15C1 based on my videos and love it. That's good. I need more though, and was wondering what I recommend for a big boy amp. Head cab combo is okay. Looking for a Marshall DSL40 but open. Well, the DSL40C is a good amp for what I said in those videos. That it's kind of like if you need something that does cleans and overdrives and leads, and each one of those things needs to be pretty good. It does it. It doesn't do any one of those things perfectly. It's not a perfect amp. It is a good multi-purpose thing that you can get for around $500. The AC15 transcends that. It is a great sounding amp, no matter the price, as long as it's a 15 watt, 20 watt amp does it for you. If you need, there are a lot of great players who would be fine using that AC15 as long as you don't need more stage volume than that can provide. And that can provide an awful lot of stage volume. So what do you mean by a big boy amp? Do you mean something that's just louder or something that does different sounds? Because the AC15 probably does more sounds than you've discovered at this point, but it won't go back and forth between this sound and these other two instantly on stage. That's why we have pedals as well. So tell me more about what you're looking for, and maybe I or other people in the chat here can steer you towards some other options. But there's nothing little boy about the AC15. Is there any advantage to point-to-point over turret board construction in terms of sound quality, noise, filtering, and grounding serviceability? Point-to-point over turret board? Well, true point-to-point is horrible. True point-to-point is like level 1 of prototyping. Turret board or eyelet board is always better than true point-to-point because you can service it better. Components aren't wrapped multiple times. You don't have nothing's under constant tension. You don't have, you have much better control of your ground layout. True point-to-point is usually kind of awful. And when I see amps that are done mostly that way, I'm like, well, yeah, but you could have built it for a lot less money if you'd used a board, and it would be much more reliable and sound better. But people on the forums love them some point-to-point. It's just a fad. It's just a fad. I don't understand it. So point-to-point is possibly the worst way you can build an amp, short of just sending a breadboard out into the world. Thanks, Andy. Well, I say that, bad PCB. Bad PCB is the worst way because there was never, ever any conceivable way going to work. But not many people were buying the Zinke era Supros. So, yeah, this true point to point, maybe if you're designing something to go on the Voyager spacecraft, it has some kind of advantage. But down here on Earth, it's just no. Have I ever heard of Jensen P12Q in a deluxe reverb reissue? Yeah, I have. It's okay. A little bright for me. Not the worst thing they've ever put out. But it doesn't. The current Jensens don't sound like the old Jensens from the 50s and 60s. Why are tube power amps so in fashion these days? All the digital stuff coming up short. I don't know. Are tube power amps back in fashion? Are power amps at all back in fashion these days? I don't see many people doing the rack things these days. I would say that for most players, you'd be hard pressed to tell a difference between tube and good solid state, good tube and good solid state. But people want tube because it's warm, tube warmth and all that, which is usually someone in a marketing office got paid for coming up with those terms, those vague fear of missing out terms. Tubes can sound better than solid state for certain styles, but a lot of that is in the preamp, unless you're running the tube power section at or near full tilt. You're not necessarily going to get all the benefits that are putatively there. If you have a master volume that never goes above 9 o'clock, you're not getting all that magic. So I'm a realist about all this. I'm very pragmatic. I have to be for my clients. I need to be able to honestly say, all you need is a Princeton, or you're going to need to have a dual 100-watt power section. We're going to split out the wet to another whole system with in-ears, the whole gamut. And I don't need to sell the guy who just needs a Princeton the whole wet dry thing. And I can't tell the guy who needs a full wet dry rig, oh man, just get this one little AC15. You just got to learn how to dial it in. Hey, Felipe. Hola. He's restoring a 70s Gianni Tremendao. Okay. Tremendao. Needs to change the tremolo pots. Can I use regular log pots instead of reverse log? You really would want to use reverse if you can. If you can get a reverse audio for the tremolo pots, you want to do that. On a Fender, it's a 3 meg reverse audio. If you cannot get reverse audio, you can get a regular log pot and then wire it backwards. So turning it counterclockwise makes it have more, and vice versa. That might have reversed from your perspective. So turning it this way gives more, and turning it that way gives less. That way, electronically, you have a nice range without the pot, even though counterintuitively, it's not going to match the numbers. The other option is just if you cannot change the clockwise or counterclockwise behavior, but you want to have a better sweep, use linear. But my preference would be for get reverse audio or get audio and just accept that it's going to operate backwards. All right, we're going to take the first of 2 7-minute intermissions because we do a 3-hour stream. Real quick, Christina, 135 watts is what it pulls from the wall. 85 watts is what it actually puts out clean. So the wattage rating on the back of a twin is the wattage it draws from your house power supply over the course of 1 hour. That's 135 watts in an hour. At any one moment, it can be producing 85 watts clean, and that doesn't add up over the course of that hour. They're different things, measuring the power draw from the output. Anyway, let's take that intermission and see you guys back in 7 minutes. All right. Follow up to Christina's question about, pardon me. Follow up to Christina's question about her twins wattage, and I'd said it's 85 watts and 135 watts is the power draw. Sorry about the confusion. I didn't read her question correctly, and when I watch it back, I might have even said late 70s because that's what she typed. I didn't see, my brain did not pick up on late 70s twin. The late 70s ultralinear twins could be 135 watts, and there were some transitions that were 100 watts. The traditional AB763 twin reverb is 85 watts, and that is the point that is measured clean. So an 85 watt twin reverb, when you push it beyond clean, gets louder than 80, puts out more than 85 watts. The ultralinear 135 watt doesn't put out a lot more than 135 because it stays clean really late in its power cycle to oversimplify. But what I was referring to, this is a 65, 66 super reverb, and here by the speakers it says 40 watts, and that's pretty accurate for clean measurement. 40 watts clean, and it puts out about 50 when you really push it. But many Fenders, starting in the CBS era, right after this last batch of rear panels, would have a wattage draw here, and it's very, well, you can't see where here is, over by the power switch. There'd be an indication of X number of watts, and the wattage shown there is always higher than the actual output of the amplifier, and that is the amount of watts it draws from your house electrical system over the course of an hour. Watt hours versus output wattage are often conflated, and that's what I thought the original question was, because it's very common to see, okay, 130 watts here, I thought this was a 50 watt amp, you know, something like that. So sorry about the confusion. Let's see, this modern deluxe reverb reissue by its power supply. Yeah, it's got it. Right here by its power supply switch, it says 100 watts. And a deluxe reverb puts out 22 watts of clean, sustained output power. When you play deluxe reverb, when it's clean, before the output section begins to break up, it's 22 watts. But it says 100 watts on the back of the amp. Is it a 100 watt amp? No, it's the power drawn from the wall. Sorry for the confusion. I spend most of my days being confused. Speaking of which, for the last decade that we've been in this house, we had one of those great big, ugly, black cast iron security doors on the front door with all the fake acorns and stuff, and we always hated it. Well, I got rid of that goddamn thing, and I put on a new security door, and it's invisible. It's a great big pane of glass with very narrow white surrounds, and I walked right into it. Just now when I went to take a break, I was thinking about Christina's question and thinking about other stuff related to the chat and just stuff, and opened the wooden door and went to walk outside. So, you know, this is the guy you're looking to for advice. In better news, though, this morning when my wife let our dog out for the first time with a new door, the dog did the same thing, walks right into that invisible wall. So it's a learning process here at our household. We'll eventually get used to that new transparent force field. Either that or dodge, parry, thrust. Probably better from this angle. Anyway, so that's the guy you're asking for advice. I just walked into a glass door, just like my otherwise quite brilliant dog did. Where were we? Okay, we got Petropolis from Felipe. Now we're in a Merlin Q. Hey, Merlin Q, working on a 70 Vibrolux reverb. The 250 peak ferrite on both tone circuits seems to have gone bad. What are my thoughts on replacing the silver mica caps? Should I stay with ceramics? First of all, you should not change them until you are sure that they are actually bad. Usually people think they're bad because there's voltage leaking or they're noisy. Make sure you don't have DC in the fiber board of the, you know, the fiber of the board itself. And that's very, very common. And I show that in many videos, how to get rid of that DC that builds up in the old, basically cardboard board. At which point, all that voltage and all that leakage and all that noise goes away, and you keep the original ceramic. Second level of that, say that you do in fact need new caps. I would suggest my preference is to keep ceramic. I like the Vichy 562R series for that, 1 kilovolt ceramics. If you do silver mica, it is an option. Make sure you get the ones that say CDM or pay way too much money for the ones that say Sozo on them. Don't buy the generic ones on the market that just say SM because they are a constant point of failure. The generic silver micas are garbage and just a waste of time and money. So first, try to retain the originals. Most of the originals I run into, especially in the picofarad values, are still fine once the DC leakage has been removed from the board. And I've got so many videos on that. If you look at my Vintage Fenders playlist, you'll see that again and again and again. It's just a standard thing I do in the course of servicing these amps. But sometimes they will be bad, in which case I like the Vichys. Ian Hilton. Well, it's not taught in schools anymore. The level of electronics that we're talking about with tube amps is not the electronics level that's being taught in electronics courses in college. If you are an electronics major, your goal is not to be doing what this schmuck is doing. Your goal is to work for Google or Cisco or something, where you're actually doing tremendous work in electronics. And so you get a lot of people who come into this from having been players or whatever, or just loving music, and they don't always have the aptitude or the ability. And so those with the strong aptitude and ability tend to go on to better things than this. And those who want to get to this often aren't capable. And so it's a very small Venn diagram of those who want to and those who can. So. And revenue's always a problem. How do you make money doing this? I'll let you know if I figure it out. Sometimes you can get yourself a YouTube channel and kind of pad out the lean months a little bit, but Herzog is basically a champ with a load resistor used as a preamp overdrive. Gar may have been the first to do that well before the 80s, the first for any Bachman Guess Who 60s. Okay, so that's the American Woman sound. All right. I do try to avoid Bachman Turner overdrive as much as possible, but I have enjoyed a lot of the Guess Who. It's odd that the same person's behind all that. It's kind of like David Lowery. I cannot stand Cracker, but I loved Kemper Van Beethoven. Sorry to go obscure on you guys. Welcome to my brain. When I'm not walking through glass, that's how my brain works. Hey, Rob French. I've acquired a 66 vibro champ that has a hole drilled in the back of the chassis, but no pot or switch present, just empty. Suggestions for usage. I don't know the size of the hole. If it's 1/4 inch or smaller, I'd say a little bitty switch so you can turn on and off the negative feedback, perhaps. Or you might find it preferable to change the mids value, because a vibro champ has got a 15K mids resistor, whereas a deluxe reverb has got a 6.8K resistor, whereas a twin reverb's got a 10K pot, and at noon is about 1 to 1.5K. So one of the reasons a champ often sounds small and boxy, besides the small enclosure and the 8-inch speaker, is that it has a 15K mids resistor. So that's another thing that you could use an existing hole in to vary. You could just put another 15K in parallel across the stock one using a switch, which would get you down to 7K, which would be like the mid-range response of a deluxe reverb. Or you could use like a 4.7K in parallel across it and give you something more approaching a twins mid-range response. It's very easy. You can see which one you like, or you can lift or change the negative feedback. Those are the two non-ruinous, least invasive options that would be musically useful. Okay, J.E. Armstrong was asking about board swapping and cheap amps. Yeah, I saw that as I was waiting outside before coming back from the intermission. Yeah, unless you are an authorized warranty service for these companies, Boss, Blackstar, etc., you're not going to be able to get these boards. So it's just not an option. Speaking of which, good luck getting any repair service from Quilter. Should I feel like a poor person because I love Peavey so much? Only if you love their logo. If you love the Peavey logo, then yes, there's something deeply flawed with you. Or you are a fourth grader trying to draw the KISS logo. Other than that, no, there's nothing wrong with Peaveys in general as an object, though they certainly have declined an awful lot in the last 10 years, which is sad to see. Well, there are a lot of people out there still making music with JC120s. Just imagine how good they could sound if they had a even better amp. Imagine he was going into the effects return or something. JC120s are, every rental company still has them. People have encountered them. They're a known quantity to musicians. A lot of musicians don't know that there are better options than the JC120. But you can still, I could do a gig with one tomorrow. I would have to live with the background hiss. And, you know, it's just, I gigged with one for 4 years. I say that having used it, wanting to defend it, they're not that great. They were just one of the best options as they first came out. Yeah, Diego is right there with me. Yeah. Yes, the distortion sounded terrible. Yeah, I mean, at one point I had almost the exact rig that Adrian Belew had when he did Discipline. And man, I needed that Boss overdrive, you know. And it still sounded like that, but it was much better than using what was built into the amp. Hey, Ian. I've seen a lot more master volumes on amps with 220K grid leaks using a dual 1 meg, but what if an amp uses 100K grid leaks? Is there a shift in tone to change those to 20K or just a matter of biasing? Well, if you want to keep the grid leaks the same, use a dual 100K pot. They make those. 220K, 100K are the typical values that you'd find in a pot. If you have an amp which has 180K and you really want to maintain that, then you can put a resistor in parallel with it across the entire pot and maintain that. Yeah, there are ways around it, but in general, you're not going to hear a huge difference between 220K and 180K. But if you 220K and 100K, you're going to hear a difference. So if you want to do master volume, a lot more master volume in that amp and had 100Ks, use a dual gang 100K pot. They're a little bit harder to find, but they are out there. Or you can make them. Or you can just say, I'm going to use a 250K and people will not hear the difference. It's not a huge difference. It's like, let's do the math real quick. I only call it my little thing. That sounded weird. I've got a spreadsheet for just about everything here. Let's see, where is the one in question. Open, recent. Okay. And now open. I've got a spreadsheet for this. I've not used it in a little bit. I've got to find where I put it. Oh, hell, I can't find it right now. I don't want to waste your time. I've got a cathode RF filter calculator I've already created. I just need to find where I've tucked it away. Anyway, you're not going to notice a huge difference between 100K or 220K or 250K following the 22 nanofarad cap. It's going to be like, okay, that one was flat down to 30 hertz. That was flat down to 27 hertz. It's not dramatic. Must be something good about Peavey if originally Leonard Skinner used them instead of Marshall. Well, they're really bad as carry-on, apparently. Okay, I'll be banned over here. Cancel me now. Well, the amps that Skinner was using, are the Deuces and such, are very, very different amps than the stuff made in the 80s and 90s and later. So you could consider them a bad omen, I suppose. Hey, Yannick, came across an Ampeg V4, which sounded like a great pedal platform. Have worked on these before. Opinion? Yeah, they're fantastic if you can carry them. They are slightly smaller SVTs, basically, for guitar. SVT is also an awesome good amp for guitar, but they are cool things that require a lot of care and feeding. A lot of I was talking to Keith Williams. He's working on a video about the history of the SVT, and I said, well, here's the secret about the SVT. Even the originals, there has never been a good SVT. There's never been a well-made, well-designed SVT, each of which has wanted to destroy itself in different ways and are quite successful at that. There are some which sound better when working than others, but there's none which continuously work. V4s like that, the PCBs and Ampegs of that era are just horrible. The heat management is horrible, but they do have a cool sound when they're not on fire. Yeah, man, I've worked on a Deuce with the phaser. It was cool, but the guy who owns it is an older guy down in Mississippi. I brought it down to him because he couldn't transport it, and it is just a boat anchor. And I say that I carry heavy amps without thinking about it all the time. When I say an amp is heavy, it is too heavy for most mere mortals. V4s, Deuces. There's a reason those guys had roadies, especially like Keith Richards and Ronnie Wood, because they could barely pick up this pencil. Little stick arms. Sometimes I don't fix these amps. If I want to fix them, I'd either have to do it as a charity thing, or to fully service an amp like that could take 3 hours. Even if I had the schematic, which a lot of those companies don't release, which adds to the trouble. I cannot make a living charging 3 hours service on an amp that's worth less than 3 hours of service costs. And so it's not. I tell people I could fix it. It's not worth it. You can buy another one just like it for less than it would cost for me to fix it for you. And I'm sorry. But that's the definition of very bottom of the market landfill targets. They're not designed to be fixed. They're not economical to repair, and I hate that. I'd love to be able to say, yeah, I'll be glad to fix it, but I cannot scale down and say the thing that would normally cost $320 is only $32 because let's support the little guy. I'm like, I can't run my life as a charity. I'd love to, but I've got people who want me to pay them for electricity and phones and internet, and my car's paid off now, but I've got other debts. I can't say, hey, I'm sorry, I'd love to pay you that, but I gave everyone else a break this month, because they won't extend me the same courtesy. So thanks, Diego, appreciate that. I don't get no respect. Looking for more power output, clean 80s tones. Well, 80s, what do you mean by 80s? I see this thrown around so much. You mean like a Dan Huff, Richard Marx produced kind of production? Or are you talking about Duran Duran? Are you talking about Bryan Adams? Are you talking about U2? Are you talking, there's so many 80s terms tossed around. A lot of those great records can be, and we're done with it. If you're doing Bryan Adams, if you're doing YouTube, you're doing REM, you're doing the Church, AC30, AC15 all day long. If you want to do Richard Marx, you use that for some tracks, but you add a tri-stereo chorus in post. So I don't. If you're trying to do hysteria, that's not the sound for you. But you also probably would hate to try to do what they actually did to get the sounds of hysteria. If you love the sound of coming out of the AC15, you just want more of it, get a 2x12 extension cab, and you're going to be pretty much almost as loud as an AC30. So for big stages, you can use the 2x12 instead of the internal 1x12, or you can use both and have three 12-inch speakers moving the air pressure. Or for some small gigs, you just take the 1x12. So basically, if you're playing bigger stages these days, they're going to have larger stages are going to have better sound systems, and you can get away with a 15-watt amp. But there's that crossover where before you have you're going to have good stage monitors, in-ears are not an option. So AC15, and then 6 feet to the left or right of it, put a 2x12. You got a big spread on stage there. You're going to hear yourself really well, but you're not going to be so loud that the PA guy is going to be mad at you. But I need more definition than 80s tones, because I was there, kids. I remember, and there was no such thing as an 80s tone. Unlike now, when there's no such thing as there's absolutely no such thing as a 2025 tone, because there's no guitar on the radio. Occasionally a Spanish guitar. Yeah, I wouldn't want to tell Howlin' Wolf jack shit. Bo Diddley could handle it. I think, but Bo Diddley was also a boxer. Yeah, Bo Diddley would just knock your block off. Howlin' Wolf would probably knife you, and I know for a fact that Albert King would have shot you if he just had enough of your lip. A Deuce was your band's first PA system. Oh my God. Hey, Wrecking Crew. For us mere mortals who can't afford original 68 small box 50-watt super bass Marshall head, do you think the Friedman Plexi? Yeah, the Friedman's great. Friedman's great. The Suhr 68 is also great. I've not had any comparable results with the Helix HX Stomp or the Tone X to playing a real one. Now, I've not tried the latest and greatest of fractals. The fractal stuff has been and continues to be a much higher level of performance than the Helix and the what do you call it? Just said it. I got one right there. Tone X. Those are baby versions. The fractal is a more real version, but the real Marshalls, the real Suhrs, the real Friedmans, that's the real deal, and that's what you want if you could all swing it. I would go play the Friedman and play the Suhr and see which one speaks to you more. They're gonna sound slightly different. They're gonna have slightly different feature sets. They're both great variations of the real deal, with warranty and current support, and no issue with, hey, this thing was designed to run on 50 hertz, but I'm running it in America with 60 hertz power. So a lot better as far as care and feeding than an old 68. Would I recommend a deluxe reverb for an amp build? Hey, Talk Hard. If not, what I recommend, it depends on how many you've built. I have answered this so much, I need to have like a little short video I can play in these streams for this. But basically, if you really know what you're doing, sure, build a deluxe reverb. Great. If you've never built an amp before, your first kit build should probably be a Champ. And if you've never built an amp before, your first kit build should be 50 to 100 pedals. Go to Eon Effects or can't remember the names of all. There's several websites that sell parts, components, boxes, schematics. Build a tube screamer, build a fuzz, build a this, build a whole bunch of pedals. Make all your mistakes at 9 volts. Make all your mistakes on something that cannot kill you. And if you make a mess of the thing, you're out $40 as opposed to $400. Learn at safe voltages, get your soldering together, then try a champ kit. And if that works the first time, then try a deluxe reverb or something more complicated. But you're setting yourself up for failure if you learn on the job on a more complicated amp, because you have to be able to look at the whole thing as a system. You don't want to just be looking at the chart and connecting the dots the way that they did it, because you need to have an understanding of what each thing does, because you're going to make a mistake. And if you don't know how it worked, it's like a crossword where you have to just erase everything, start from the beginning. Whereas if you know how things work, you can say, oh, this is the behavior it's exhibiting. That's got to be either this or this. Let me fine tune where I'm troubleshooting, if that makes sense. What stops me besides the money and fixing the cheap ones? It's just the money. It's like that Boss Katana I had come in. It had no output whatsoever, but the effects send worked, and the USB worked, so I knew the preamp was working and all the DSP was working, but the power section was bad, and there was nothing visibly wrong. And I knew that the power MOSFET was probably in need of replacement, but what I did not know was whether the power MOSFET had just died or whether something else related to it had gone wrong and taken it out. And I didn't want to get a new $80 power MOSFET, spend all the time desoldering the 68 pins, putting the whole thing back in, and then have the new one die because something else was wrong in the amp. But I couldn't troubleshoot that because I didn't have, the Boss doesn't publish the schematic. So I would need to trace out the output section and power supply of that model. So that could take 2 hours on a multi-layer through-hole PCB, a surface mount PCB. And so let's say 2 hours to trace just the power and output section, and then an hour to study it. We're at 3 hours before I even spend an hour researching how to get the parts and getting the parts and all that. So we're at 4 hours. The kid's got to pay before I even lift a soldering iron. And at 4 hours, at the time I was charging $80 an hour, so that's 320 hours to fix an amp that sells new for $350. So I told the kid, I'm not going to charge you for the time I've got looking at your amp. It's probably this, but I can't guarantee that. And if I don't want to volunteer him for a big repair, and I don't want to waste my time or my money. So I said, hey, the headphone out works, the USB out works, the line out works. You've still got a great home practice amp, but it's not worth fixing. And that's just reality. And I still get shit from people for not being able to fix it. You're not a real tech. I'm like, there's a lot more to it than can I? Hey, sent to me. We've been trying to get in touch with each other the past 3 days. So Mototone got on the Brit 50 watt 2204 7678. Is that good? That's a great kit to build. I was going to talk to you about that the other day, but you had the IT issue at work, and at the same time my wife was having a thing. Sorry, it's hard to juggle all the cats. If you're looking for a 2203, that would be the one to go for. And when I talk to you, there are things you can do that will give it a little more overlap tonally with the Plexi circuit, the 5987. So yeah, I think you'd probably be thrilled with that as long as you know what to expect. So I'll talk to you about it. Maybe after this chat we can get that working. But you don't want to do the 4-input version. You want to do the 2-input version, if that's what you're talking about. The 4-input version of the 2203, 2204 was a transition model and a mistake. You want the 2-input version. All right, so, well, Mark is, I hate to say good news, but the good news is, it's not a problem just in one channel, and the problem is probably in the output. So if you got distorted low notes, you could have a bad ground, you could have something really, really misbiasing. The next thing I would do is simplify as much as possible. figure out which channel uses the fewest components, and only use that. I think in your case it's going to be the EF86 channel. So take out all the tubes related to the tremolo, and then just do EF86 into the phase inverter, pretty much. And you know, it could be something as simple as one of the cathode resistors is in need of replacement, because it sounds like something is going into a bad point of operation. And since every tube in that amp is cathode biased, it could, and I'm going to assume you've changed out all the electrolytics. It could be a bad cathode resistor, could be a bad plate resistor. I don't think you have any cathode follower in that setup, but that's what I'd look at next. Harmonic tremolo, what is it actually doing? Is it hard on tubes? Hey Chengo, I've got a video on what it's actually doing. It's not hard on tubes. It's tricky to get it working right consistently because you're looking at a whole bunch of values for things which change. Let me call up, see if I can find a link to the video in question. Let's see, come on, window, open up. All right, just 1 second. Gotta look at my own stuff. Sonic, harmonic. I've got a video where I show how this works. All right, just 1 second. Is it a concert? Got so many other channels. Just a second, I'm trying to get. I'll find this afterwards and put it in the link to the chat. I don't want to spend too much time fighting this. I've got a certain video. I do all that stuff in Chrome because it doesn't work in Safari, and that Windows is minimized right now, and I can't get it to open up right now. And anyway, I have a video explaining how it works in a Fender. It's not hard on the tubes. It's just tricky to get the balance right. And it's very similar to what they do in the Vox, and it's similar from a certain point of view to what they do in the Magnetone. The Magnetone uses some varistors instead of caps. It's a different approach. Basically, they're playing around with the phase and blending. Phase is not always polarity. How much work to convert channel 1 of a Fender Bantam bass amp to a Fender reverb circuit? Have a 15-inch guitar, speaker, and amp. Works great. I don't know. I have no experience with a Bantam bass amp. I imagine if being a Bantam bass amp, it probably does not have a reverb transformer, so you would need to add that plus the tank. And I don't know what the tube complement of a Bantam bass is, so I don't know whether it's even doable. But I don't have time to look that up for you right now. I apologize. I, in general, would suggest if it sounds great as is, get a reverb pedal. I won't tell anyone. It's cool. You're good. I wouldn't do a whole bunch of work making one thing another thing. I would say, hey, this is this thing, and it does this really well, and now it has a reverb pedal that I use with it, and I have all these other sounds I like, without spending any money fundamentally changing the amp. And I should be selling you, yeah, send it here, let me do that, I can do that. I'll totally sell you. Always be closing, all that bullshit. No, you get a reverb pedal. There's lots of them on the market. Hey, Randy. Well, I respect Randy Bachman a lot, but I just cannot stand the BTO songs that are on the radio all the time. I mean, hives want to flee, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why. There's nothing wrong with them. It's all my own personal flaw. But if I ever hear taking care of business again, I'm going to kill somebody. I guess I can't say that on YouTube these days. Hopefully it's buried enough in the chat that I won't get banned. But there are words I can't use. I got in trouble. I had a video that they threatened to take actions against my channel on because I had said I wasn't a fan of shotgunning parts, and the shotgun triggered some automatic. I understand why, but anyway, when can you send me the Garnet revolution? I think we need to wait for a change in relations between Canada and the United States, and that's all on this side of the border that needs to change, by the way. It's always been extremely expensive shipping amps to and from Canada due to customs and weight and all that fun stuff. But imagine right now it would just be a horrible experience for both of us, and I don't think that we need to get into that. I wish if you ever do need service for your Garnet, I know a lot of great Canadian techs I'd be glad to recommend to you. Oh, you're in New York. Well, okay. Well, send me just the chassis of your Garnet, and I'd love to. Okay. Send me an email, Randy, and I'll be glad to accept just your chassis, because it's a lot easier and safer to ship a 20-pound box than an 80-pound box. I thought you were a Canadian in your beloved homeland, in which case that border becomes a huge issue for shipping. Hey, Brett, you tried the Suhr Bella for a pedal platform amp, but I found it anemic and not lively. Was it in a guitar store? You might have had a bad tube. It's not an anemic or dull-sounding amp. Any other amps I could suggest for a good pedal platform with an FX loop? That's of the stuff on the market today. That's about as good as it gets for a really clean amp with an effects loop, because a lot of the other options don't have very good effects loops. How clean do you want it to be? I would also suggest the Vox AC30 Custom. I would also suggest, if you don't need an effects loop, which you don't with these amps, a twin reverb. But of the things which are clean with an effects loop, the Suhr is the best option, but you might have played one that had a bad tube in a music store or if someone's house, because that is not an amp that I would ever describe as anemic or not lively. It could also be you were listening in a bad acoustic space. I'm not trying to tell you how the world works, but there are places where a great amp will not sound. You just can't get a sound, and that's not been my experience of the Bella. Hey, Dean, I would not put a cooling fan in a Classic 30 because all it's going to do is take all the dust in the environment and cram it into the places that are most likely to be affected by heat in that amp and make things worse. There are many things that Classic 30s need. More dust is not one of them. Cooling fans are not a great idea. The main problem with the Classic 30 is that the output tubes hang down with no protection in transit. They tried various little things that they add on over the years, but some of them cause more problems than others. It's a weird design. It's even worse on the Delta 30, Delta 15, but the Classic 50 is a better design than the Classic 30. But none of them benefit from the dust that a cooling fan will inject. Somebody's been watching my channel, and I approve. Hey, Christina, I mentioned that I have lean months. I figured I was swapped all the time. I'm swapped all the time, but I can only have so many amps going at once due to physical space. And, there are times when I will order the parts, and due to all those factors outside my control, I'll have an amp 90% done, and the 3 parts that I need that were supposed to be here last Wednesday to finish it won't show up for another week, and I can't get paid for that week. And so I have times when I'm working all the time, but it may be 2 weeks before I can bill anyone. I try not to bill until the work is done and is ready to be sent back or be picked up. And sometimes if there's a big parts outlay for something, I'll say, hey, the parts are going to be $135.42, Venmo or PayPal or whatever, and then I'll order the parts, because I can't be out of pocket for large things. 'Cause it depends on the week. Sometimes I'll be like, yeah, sure, I'll just do this. It'll be added at the end. But if I get 5 amps in at the same time, each amp needs $100 worth of parts. I often cannot just do that. I have to tell the owner, okay, these are the parts it needs. Let's pay for those parts, and then the labor all gets settled at the end. It gives me an incentive to finish the damn thing, and gives them a peace of mind that I'm not going to take their money and then just let it sit. But it can be a month where all the checks, so to speak, come in at the last all in 1 week together, but the 3 weeks before I had no income coming in, and sometimes I stagger that a little bit, but sometimes it's a steady flow. But I have no control over UPS, USPS, or FedEx. I have no opinion on the construction of the Chris Stapleton 62 Princeton. I've not had one come in, but I imagine that it was made in the same factory as all the other various modern Fenders, in which case it's okay. Not great, not horrible. Could be better, easily be better, unless it's built the way that I have not had one in. So if it's built like the standard reissues, it's fine. If it's built like the custom series, like the 64 custom, then it's hot garbage. But hopefully Chris wouldn't do that to us. Had 2 SVTs in his back line at the festival I did last weekend. Dustin does professional sound, live sound, guys. Both of them were acting up in different ways. Yeah, just the nature of the beast. You know, I've done SVTs for very high level players with famous names, and theirs don't work. And the ones that I had been with Andy Fuchs' shop 6 weeks before. And I talked to Andy's guy, and he and I had been noticing the same thing and making the same fixes and saying, hey, when you get back to New York, which is where the artist's home base was, you need to have these things totally gone over, all this stuff replaced, deep level service. But the Fuchs shop and I were only able to do high quality Band-Aids. But because of the heat and mechanical stress issues present in an SVT, these problems resurface, and the real solution is buy something that's better. The only guy I know who consistently uses an SVT with good results is Dan Hungate, who plays with, or is it David Hungate, who plays with Bonnie Raitt. And I don't know how many SVTs he tours with or whether it's just babied, but he's also playing very low stage volume. He's basically using SVT as a great big portaflex. So Hank C., one of my thoughts on a Michael Lando amplifier, it is a terrible, terrible hot rod deluxe or DeVille that has had two clean channels made instead of a clean channel and a total awful dirty channel. But it is the same core amp that wants to set itself on fire, that's built like crap, that will fail on you, and it has Mike Landau's name on it. The Mike Landau version and the George Benson version are both prettier versions of the same shitty amp that's going to have the same repetitive, predictable, easily preventable, if Fender cared about you, failures. If Fender wanted to make a good version of those amps, they could do it for about $30. They have never cared to spend the $30 where it counts. Instead, they come up with some artist affiliation so that they'll sell some more. Because, hey, Mike Landau uses this, gotta be good. Mike Landau probably has like 30 of them in a warehouse, and just calls his rental company and say, hey, send me some that are working. Or if it doesn't work, he swaps it out for a different thing. He's got a budget. But, he's got a guy like me who can go through his shit if he needs to. I could make one of those things bulletproof. But should I have to on a brand new amp? Especially one that's being sold as an artist edition? Oh, let's not get into that, Christina. That doesn't... It's a slippery slope for me, and it's meaningless as to the quality of my content. And a lot of the more famous ones I've had very little interaction with. So it's not like we're hanging. Even some of the ones that I've spoken to quite a bit, and I'll put him out here as someone who's famous among guitarists. David Grissom. We've spoken maybe 5 times over 5 years briefly. We always got along great, but we're not besties, friendly, certainly, absolutely. Know who each other are, yeah. Answer when each other's call, yeah, that's great. I've got his number, and I've used it once or twice in 5 to 10 years, because I don't want to be that guy who's grabbing every coattail that passes by. It's tricky. A lot of it's marketing bullshit. There are some MOSFETs that behave more and more like tubes, the L&D 150, but it behaves more like a pentode than a triode. But there are attributes, and you can design a circuit using JFETs, replicate a tube circuit using JFETs. You got to change values and impedances and stuff to get this correct behavior. But they are closer in their behavior than most op amps are, for instance. But most of it is marketing. Find 5 actual electronics engineers who do this to agree on what counts as a tube-like behavior, because you're talking about an amplification. Is it a frequency response range? Is this the tube amplification range, or is this it, or is it this? Is it slew rate? Is it transient response? Is it overdrive characteristics? Is it compression? It's all these things, but all these things are influenced by all the other things in the circuit: the amount of voltage, the values of all the components attached to the grids and the plates and the screens and all these things. Cathodes, screens don't apply for triodes. But there's so many variables. But in terms of the core behavior, what the tube does that solid state does not, that's where it gets really nebulous to certain degrees. The tube behaves more like, a tube and a transistor have more in common than a transistor does with a comparable section of an op amp, even though the op amp is going to have a transistor and or JFET or whatever in it. It's a whole bunch of cumulative stuff that's probably above my pay grade, but mostly when I see those claims made, I'm like, whatever, dude. Do I have, or would it be a good idea, or difficult or crazy expensive to get a good preamp and power tube tester? It would be very cool and helpful for me to have and share my Jedi tube knowledge. I have been given 2 tube testers, both of which are in my storage space that I need to restore if and when I feel a need to use them. Because if I have a question about power tube behaviors, I have a real serious question, I can always drive over to Tube Depot, and they've got the real nice machines, and they'll do that for me. In general, when I first power an amp up, I'm operating on, if necessary, I'll use the Variac, but I always power an amp the first times up with at least the current limiter, the bulb limiter that I showed last stream. So if there's a problem in a power tube, which is much more common than a dangerous fault in a preamp tube, it will usually show by so I get a glow, or tubes will just stay cold, or this tube gets too hot. So I don't really need to test it. It's kind of a pass-fail system. And as far as preamp tube behaviors, since they're very rarely of any danger to the circuit itself, in which case the bulb limiter is there, I can hear it. So the amps are my tube testers, beyond the level of whether it's safe. And the bulb limiter and the Variac tell me whether a tube is capable of operating at all. But if I need beyond that, like if I get a SVT that's had a lightning show in there, I'll take those 6 6550s over to Tube Depot, and they'll test them and say, okay, these 5 are good or these 3 are good, and I'll say, all right, well, can you match the remaining good ones? Can you match out some replacements, and have the customer buy those replacements? So instead of the customer having to buy 6 new 6550s, the customer may have to buy 1 to 3 new 6550s that match what he already has or she already has. And so Tube Depot works with me because I buy so many tubes from them. It's in everyone's benefit. So I've got access to the good stuff already. I don't know that I have any Jedi tube knowledge. I know that Gooden here, I know that about 5 to 10 guys who are regularly on the channel know more about the tubes themselves than I do. For instance, at least the ins and outs and the history of all that stuff. I know how they work. I know how the circuits that they go into, but yeah. What's my opinion about GK ML250s? Well, I sure wanted one in 1986, 87 when Gilmore was using one for momentary lapse of reason, and Alex Lifeson had the I think they had the Big Brother version of that, the preamp version. I don't know that I'd want one now, but I sure did then. And there are other things that'll get those sounds. Dan Huff just put out a video on 80s tones. Well, Dan Huff just put out a video on his 80s tones, which is a substantial part of the stuff come out of the LA studios at the time. But the bands that I was listening to and really cared about in the 80s were not tri-stereo chorus bands. The Mike Landau, Dan Huff sounds did not really appeal to me. But, you know, I think Richard Marx sold a lot more copies of his album than my favorite bands did at the time. But, you know, that's why we have many flavors of ice cream. And I have nothing but respect for Dan Huff. But that's not my world back then. My world had a lot less hairspray. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate that. It's the music in that was oh, I can't remember his name right now, and it's right there at the tip. I had it in my head the other day. Anyway, I've got a link in the description of that video to the video where he is doing the playing, and fantastic player. And all that was just his telly and his Duesenberg into a 68 custom deluxe reverb that I'd made into a real amp for him. I think with the ET65, just stuck a 57. He just came over and played, and that's, you know, the original audio video. You can see him do all that in real time. All I did for the Marshall video was take that track and add a little more reverb, a little darker, longer reverb to it, so it was a little more background music. Because I wanted just to try to do more of the visual storytelling in that video, but I did not want to use stock generic YouTube background music from all those sites. There's so much bad music out there, especially there's this trend. I see videos where they have videos with sped up vocals, so it all sounds like the Chipmunks, and it's repetitive. It's like 2 to 4 bars of the same phrase with like chipmunk vocals, and people use this shit. Like, why would who would ever choose to do this? Do you hate your audience so much? But apparently most people really hate their audience because they have this stuff. It is just so bad. I'd rather have dead silence than bad music. But when I have the option to use quite good music, I will always do that. On that note, it is time for our second intermission, and I'll see you guys back in a little bit. Thank you. Well, I think I've said everything I need to say about meeting Albert King. I was 16 or 17, and he was terrifying. And I was very, very polite and very, very grateful to meet him and to hear him play. Well, he did not talk to me because I was some little white kid. And it's not a race thing. It's just I was not a blip on his radar. I was not in his world. I was not of his world. I was in his presence, and I was polite and quiet, and so I satisfied everything he needed of me. But I got to hear him play. I was working as an apprentice at a vintage guitar shop in town, and he was in town, and they were doing some work on his guitars. I restrung Lucy, which is really hard to do on a left-handed guitar, and I'm trying to remember his tuning. It was like a E minor major 6 or something. Very, very difficult. And he came back and made sure, because he had this, I don't remember what brand of strings he had, but it was a pack of strings that had spares for all the plain strings, and he made sure that the spare strings were still in the case, that I had not thrown away his extra strings. That was what he cared about. He didn't care how I put the strings on or any of that. He just wanted to make sure that the 3 extras were in his case. And if I lost those 3 extras, he'd have words for me. Hey, Arky Steve Smith, thank you very much. I've got a 335 of yours to get to this week. And I've got a logo to put on your Princeton, and we got to do something about your reissue deluxe. So they're all going to happen this week. At least the 335 is going to get started this week. What is my opinion on the Excelsiors? They're awful. They're awful. They have no repairability or long-term viability. They can be made to sound kind of good. They have a really terrible, I don't remember what they did with some kind of tone switch. Anyway, basically you can turn it into an actual 5E3 Deluxe, but it's still built horribly with the preamp up here and the power down here and all these go-betweens. They're kitsch. They're built to be kitschy. If you care about what it looks like more than how it works, they're fine, but I would not waste my money on it. And I don't care if Mike Campbell used one. Mike Campbell might have used it because it sounded like crap, and he liked the way it sounded like crap on certain things where he wanted to have like maybe he only used it with like a EQ pedal to dial in like a radio sound. I don't know. But when you see a famous player using a bad thing, doesn't mean that it's a good thing for you. Remember, Mike Campbell owns like 300 guitars and 700 amps, and he's got a warehouse. He's got a whole thing set up with like pneumatic things that slide guitars across the ceiling and come down to him as he needs them. He has more money than we do. So if he buys a pawn shop series amp and thinks it's funny to use this piece of shit on stage and it doesn't sound very good and that's what he needs it for, he's not wasting any money. He's not losing any sleep over that. He wrote Boys of Summer. He's doing okay. Back in the day when writing a song could actually bring in royalties. For those of us who have to justify every purchase, the Excelsior is not one I could ever recommend to someone that I like. I don't know you, Eric, but I'm inclined to like you. So I would say avoid. Well, if you built a modded deluxe reverb for your first amp and it works, you have either done this before, or you got very lucky, or you have a great aptitude. I see people making horrible mistakes on their first kit builds. And so in general, simplify, give yourself the best chance of success. I don't know why I keep messing with these things on the desk, except they're out of order, and my OCD is, I'll put this away. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to look at them. Anyway, simple is usually a safer bet, but I'm glad it worked for you, Talk Hard. Talk Hard. Anyone ever stay at Rat's Blues Motel in Clarksdale? No, I've been down to Clarksdale quite a few times. Never stayed at a hotel there. or motel. Am I familiar with Rob Robinette Black Vibe circuit and use of Pro Reverb component values? No, I'm sure I am. I don't know what Rob's calling it. I've checked the Rob Robinette site a few times. He's got one mod up there. He called my mod, and he got it wrong. And I was like, Rob, no, that's not what I'm doing. You're describing exactly backwards for the Lyle mod on a Tweed Fender. But there's nothing against Rob. I just don't go to his site to see what all his mods are because I've got my own approach to things. I don't copy mods off other pages. And that's not me being conceited. It's just not. If I want to make an amp change its behavior, I don't look to see what the gear page says about it. This is how a triode works. These are the options I have in front of me. Let's do it this way. Hey, John, any specific power tube recommendations for an AC15, particularly for longevity and robustness? I don't know that there's any current EL84 on the market that's a guarantee. I would say the safest bet would be the 7189 sold by the Tube Store, but I'm not sure what the price on those coming from Canada these days is, because those are some Russian military 7189s that are more rugged than an EL84. Of the current production EL84s, I quite like the JJs, and there's going to be a lot of forums telling you that they sound awful, and I don't know why, because, sorry, I've got a stray hair, and it's not mine. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the things on my desk. Does the JJ sound really good in the EL84s and a Vox? I think there are people on the forums who just like to say, that's not very expensive. I will automatically dislike it because it's not expensive. Or everyone likes this, so I won't. It's like people like, I don't like the Beatles, they're overrated. Okay, idiot. Ooh, what a bold thing to say. You have no ears or nothing between them, but okay, you're bold and you said it. I bought a 77 Twin for its D120Fs to put in a smaller cab for the dual Showman Reverb. I just picked up. Can't get the speakers loose. Tips for getting them off the particle board baffle. Yeah, they will often stick to the particle board, and you will lose your gaskets in the process. You can get replacement gaskets, generic gaskets for that diameter speaker. And if you're trying to preserve the gasket and preserving the particle board, it can be tricky. You can try getting a very thin knife and heating the blade and working it under and working it around, but you're going to get some damage to the gasket. In which case, sometimes the best bet is to have a new felt gasket for a 12-inch speaker and change that out. But I don't have any tips beyond that. Yeah, sometimes the speakers, they just stick on there. No updates on the tailors right now. Richard has been too busy with amps and such. Your SVT2 has been pretty much trouble-free for 23, almost like 30 years. Congratulations. Don't play the lottery because you've already won. You won't have any further luck. I do not use a fume extractor, and neither do I open windows on both sides of the house. I just don't worry about it. If anything gets me, it probably won't be that. Let's see. Would I happen to know anyone who makes a turret board for an F511 build instead of the unreliable fiber board? I think Mojotone's got one. I know Mojotone's got a turret board for a 5E3. Let me check for you real quick. Not Mojotone, sorry, CE Distribution, which would be tubesandmore.com for you guys. Just 1 second. And that was a 5F11. Yep. All right, part number. That's the skew. So let me do this as a version that you guys can get to. All right, just a second. Got a link coming for you. Got a link. Get it while it's hot. There's your 5F11 turret board. Should have done it in the live chat because I just screwed up where I was in the scrolling one. Almost there. All right, almost there. I got it. All right, we're back. We're back. Sorry. I have too many things on the screen. Brett tried the Bella New in a studio at a dealer. Even turned it up. Just had no life, no mids. Felt dead and stiff. Well, I don't know what to tell you. It might have had a bum tube, but and it just sounds like a big clean fender. Just sounds like a big clean fender. It's not designed to have a ton of character. It's designed to take pedals. It is designed for that thing. It's not an amp that I personally would use because I like the things that are imperfections. I would rather have an AC30 for that and a whole bunch of pedals than anything designed to work with an effects loop and all the pristine stuff. But that's I cannot try to impose my taste on the entire world. Yeah, Dumble, the steel string swinger, whatever. The output is just SVT output. I like Mould a lot on A New Day Rising. I think Zen Arcade is my preference, though. Yeah, I think that was Distortion Plus into a JCM 800. His pre-strat day says mostly the Flying V and a lot of attitude. Let's see. Johnny Marr, The Cure and Squeeze, very nice. Now there's a lot of JC120 on there, and there's nothing wrong with those sounds, but you can get those sounds with better amps these days. It's a nuanced take, not a criticism, but my hand too close to the camera is putting my face out of focus. Well, first of all, I saw that you commented this, Martin, when I was doing the last intermission, and I think you might be out of sync, number one. Number two, yeah, it's a trade-off. I have this thing optically zoomed, sorry, digitally zoomed just a little bit to get this framing because the full lens I thought was too wide and too fisheye, but because I did the digital zoom, I don't have the face eye auto detect on, so it wants to grab whatever object comes close to the lens versus preferring my face and my eye, which is good and bad because it means that I can hold up something and it instantly pretty much will grab it. Though the transition's not perfect. It still wants to grab my eye over it, but it will grab a thing close. Whereas before, it would really wait before it shifted. It wanted to stay on my face. But it means if I talk with my hands, sometimes my hands get the focus, and that's fine. My hands, I have better looking hands than my face. I have great hands. I could be a hand model. This maybe 15 years ago. So it's a balancing act. If I go, this is about 6 millimeters right now. The full 24 I thought was too wide. If I go to the other lens and I get 28, it's not quite this. It's this, but it's a little bit flatter. I like this a lot. I think it's got some character. I think it's engaging without being the Busta Rhymes kind of thing. I love that. If I borrow that 11 mil of yours, Brad, I could do the whole "Give Me Some Mo" thing here. But I like this is kind of dynamic and interactive and shifting, but it's right on the verge. I agree with you. Hey, Imbium Carpful 80 Ultralinear Pro had a microphonic OG tubes plugged in 2 spares, worked fine. So ordered 2 replacements. Do I need to rebias? Do anything with a high balance spot? Yeah, you should rebias. I don't know if you need to. You might magically have everything matched. As far as the 2 spares, again, see my response I think last week. If you have 4 output tubes, you have a push pair and a pull pair, and you need to change out 2. Have one new, have this one and this one be the new tubes, and this one be the old tubes. You don't want to have new tubes and old tubes, or the bias might be off. If you're not hearing hum, then you don't need to do anything with the hum balance. If you have hum, then turn it until that goes away, then you're good. You still may not have the optimal biasing, but you could have absolutely safe biasing. Biasing is a range, and there's the optimal for one playing taste, a different playing taste, and there's the range of the safe. As long as you're in the range of the safe, then everything else is subjective. But if you have a current draw imbalance, then that's what that little hum balance pot is for. I think that punchy in your face tone was hitting the tape real hard, and maybe some compressors more than whatever the amp was. It's a good recording. I don't ever want to hear another cover of it again in my life. Have I heard any of the AI music programs? I probably have on some other videos on YouTube. I will never use any AI generated content on the channel because that is something I disagree with, and it's a slippery slope. Now, I'll use certain things about the AI are good at, like I've got this filter where if I want to make sure you don't hear any of the fan noise over there, though, I've got the fan really low. If the air conditioning really, really loud. This is an AI thing which detects human voice and filters out stuff that's not human voice. But it's not replacing my voice or creating the words. I'm not scripting it. This is not the enemy that will overthrow us. I've got some other AI stuff for video and photo stuff, like the ability, if this were a still image of myself, I could take this picture and identify myself as the subject and mask it perfectly and change the color balance of everything that's not me. And I like that. That gives you creative tools, but it's letting the human make creative choices. It's giving us more crayons in our box as opposed to replacing us as artists, as creators, as thinkers. So I don't want to use AI music. I'll use AI stuff to say, hey, all right, identify the drum beat and time the delay to it if I wanted to. But I won't use AI to create a guitar part. It's a slippery slope. Everyone's going to find their own balance, but I'm not going to use AI background music. No, there's the world of good music out there. And I've got a lot of it recorded on the channel already, and I'll reuse it. Yeah, Richard, Distortion Plus. Horrible sound. Fantastic. Hey, Mark, just one more thing. If the farting in the AC15 were in the output section, wouldn't it be more apparent as more I turn up? It's audible at really low volume. Well, that raises a question, whether it's always there and it's being masked as you turn it up. But in which case it's not coming through the speakers so much. Maybe it's not coming from the speakers. Maybe it's coming from the output transformer. Do this as a test. If you have a dummy load, do a dummy load so you don't have a speaker connected. See if you're hearing that coming out of the physical output transformer. It's possible that that's what you're hearing. And as you turn the amp up, you're not hearing anymore because the volume coming from the speaker drowns it out. But as you turn the speaker down, you're hearing that background noise. That happens quite a bit in Marshalls, but it could also be happening in your AC15. Roll that out at least. Oh God, the ART SGX 2000. Ugh. I'd forgotten about that awful thing. Hey, I don't see a username for you, but I appreciate that. First of all, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Sound-wise, what is my opinion about the 60s AC15 with the EF86 preamp? Yeah, I think it's one of the absolute best amps ever designed. I think when Mark Frith there gets done with his, he will have one that other people will kill for. I've got some videos on my channel of me doing a couple of them. The most recent one was the 62. We don't get as many of the early 60s 15s here in the States as we get the 30s. But I think it's one of the absolute most glorious things ever made, despite all their best efforts to pinch every other penny. Or maybe they're pinching pounds. Thank you for being here. I'm not sure how you're here without a username, but here you is. Darko, that's right. Extra plain strings. I'd forgotten about that. It just came to me. Good morning, Simon, down there in Australia, 6 a.m. Yeah. Maybe someday I'll do one for more of my Australian peeps. I'll start about 11 o'clock at night here. It'll be, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon for you guys. I've met so many musicians and techs and wonderful people in Australia. It's weird when I think about people I know, online friends. So many are in Australia, and because of the time zone difference, we just don't talk a lot, not in real time. Brad was talking to me last night or the night before. I'm like, hey, it's good to hear from you. I got a crash, man. It's middle of his day. But maybe I'll do one of these things late at night for you Australian freaks. Maybe I'll get a bunch of Australians on here and see what happens. That'd be fun. You're always welcome, Simon. Yeah, Diego. I'm never. Oh, by the way, Diego, I want to thank you for your advice on cropping last week. I don't want to turn this into a photography thing, but I felt watching it back that I came across like I was dismissive of what you said because my idiot brain misread what you said initially. But I really appreciate your advice on cropping, and it's something that I do take into account, and I know that the more I do this, the more I will take it into account. So I was not dismissing your point. But anyway, yeah, I don't have any bad opinion of Dan Huff or Michael Thompson or those guys, Michael Landa, because of what they sounded like in 1987. That's what they were. That's what the producers wanted them to sound like. And, if what's his name? Can't remember the guy's name. He did so many of those things. He produced all that stuff. If he wanted you to have this sound, you had that sound. Because if you didn't have that sound, there are 10 other guys that were ready to do that for you. David Foster. So you weren't trying to make express your inmost soul. You're trying to make David Foster happy, and David Foster wanted something that made Peter Cetera happy. So they played very, very well. And Dan Huff certainly has changed the way he sounds when he gets to Nashville. And I really, like someone was, I think T777 was saying things about Dan Huff and Tim Pierce that I don't agree with, because for the same point, they weren't playing their music; they were being asked how to fill roles. And Tim Pierce, for instance, I don't care how many bad Pepsi commercials or Cher albums he did, because he did "Don't Dream It's Over," that album for Crowded House. Now, he has said that he did not need to play on that album at all. And Neil Finn could have done all the guitar, but the producer at the time wanted a guitarist, and so he was being asked to play on these songs. And he played beautifully on those songs. You wouldn't even know that it was the LA studio guy on those songs. You'd think it's Neil Finn, because he went to where Neil Finn is musically, and Neil Finn has done almost all his guitar since, his own guitar, and has been still in that same vein. And he did the guitar on Iris by Goo Goo Dolls. Now, Goo Goo Dolls is weird because they're just some, just like punks who hung out at the skate rink. It just generic punk rock, but someone decided that the singer, who wasn't originally the singer, the bassist used to be the singer. Anyway, the blonde guy had cheekbones, and so they decided to make him a star, and they did Iris. And Iris could have been all kinds of stuff, but Tim Pierce came up with that tuning and that part, and just made that song infinitely better. So I cannot dismiss any of those guys just because most of the music that they did was, as they would describe it at the time, pablum. But man, the talent is there. Yeah, I've never been to Rats Motel, Adrian. Clarksdale is an odd place, but you know it is a real place, and then there's some touristy things happening on top of that. But yeah. Hey Jeff, I've had many bad cats. Some of them are good, some of them are terrible. Like any of the bad cats where they have can clamps holding tubes in place, I'm not a fan of, because that's not a good idea. But basically, bad cats are the same thing as Matchless, with the same strengths and weaknesses, and I think the weaknesses can, in time, catch up with and overtake the strengths, and I think they're way overpriced for what they are. I don't see how they make a dime making them because they're so overbuilt. I've heard the new ones are better, but I have heard conflicting things about that. But I have no experience with the new ones, so I don't know what they're doing this year. But of the ones from the '90s and such, there's an aesthetic thing that certain brands do where everything has to be overbuilt and way more than mil spec, and there's a reason mil spec is no more than 270 degrees on a wrap. If you have multiple wraps, you're actually causing problems. So, and they don't know how to bias an amp. Hey, Phil. Non-amp question. I've been reading James Elroy, Willie Vaughan, Viotin, and Steinbeck recently. Can I recommend any other American authors? Well, yeah, but I don't know whether the certain genres or kinds of stories or books you prefer. Of those, I'm most familiar with Steinbeck. I am a huge fan of Faulkner and Twain, but I understand that many people are going to find Twain to be archaic, though I think his thought was incredibly modern, especially if you really read what he's writing, where a lot of what he's saying is disguised as a second layer of meaning. And Faulkner can be a difficult read because his language can be so thorough and yet beautiful. And at the same time, his use of dialect can be impenetrable to those not from this culture. But once you kind of get get it in your head, it makes sense. But Faulkner's, have you ever read Gabriel Garcia Marquez? Now, I've only read him in translation, but that's one of the things that strikes me is that, at least in the good translations of Marquez that I've read, he and Faulkner seem to use poetry the same way, language in the same way. It's non-rhyming poetry as much as anything else, while still being narrative and character-driven. But if there's specific styles that you prefer, I'd be glad to give you some more specific recommendations. But I would say if you want to know about America, John Steinbeck, Faulkner, and Twain are the three pillars. I have thoughts on Quilter amps. They exist. I don't care about the sound, and I don't have a need for them, but I understand people like to have them as backups, if nothing else. And I've heard horrible things about their repair services, but I've only heard that. Yeah, a thin palette knife is what I was thinking about, but it doesn't have to be an expensive palette knife. It just some kind of thin blade that you can heat up. Probably get just a very thin putty knife that would do the job. Attenuators that go into the effects loop are going to be master volumes. Attenuators that operate on speaker level are going to be actual attenuators. So I would suggest that you need to understand why one that goes in your effects loop may be $50 because it's just a volume pot in a box with 2 jacks versus an actual attenuator. I would avoid the attenuators that go in the effects loop. Unless you have like a Hot Rod Deluxe, in which case it's great to have a little volume pot in a box. That's all it is. So it's not an attenuator in the capital A sense. All right, we've got some more. I don't know Richmond Fontaine, and I don't know Willie. Is it Vlatin? Vlatin. I'll have to look up Willie Vlatin. Marquez is amazing. Ogden Nash is fun, but Ogden Nash is not a great writer. He's a charming writer. Walt Whitman is fantastic, but Walt Whitman is poetry, not prose. And so in terms of novels, Hemingway or Fitzgerald, neither. Fitzgerald, I don't care for, and Hemingway, I'm not a big fan. But you may disagree. Read them both and see what you think. I like what loosely could be described as Americana. Well, Cormac McCarthy then. Add some Cormac McCarthy. I'm not sure if he's Irish or American, but he writes what has certainly become Americana. Hey, Mr. Brad. Did I type in the wrong thing? Sorry. Well, check and see if they have one. I'm not. They might have one. Sorry, AC. It's hard for me to. I have too many variables on the screen, and 5F11, 5F1 both show up in the same search, and I just saw it come up and like, hey, there it is. Sorry about that. Are Marshall JVM 410 amps junk? Kind of. The plastic pots worry me about reliability and other things. The pots are long-term problems, and the main issue of the JVM 410 is that the entire front panel with all the switches and pots are only held in place by some standoffs, and those standoffs get fatigued, and then the board can move a little bit. And as that board moves a little bit, it fatigues the standoff even more, and then it repeats, and all of a sudden your pots are loose, your switches are intermittent, things get dirty. So I'm not a huge fan, but they're not junk. They're just not great. Kerouac's an interesting read, but it's very much of its time, kind of like Fitzgerald. Very vital in the time that they were writing. Same for Salinger, Catcher in the Rye. It's every teen angst thing written or done as a movie or TV show since then has been that same thing. So when we read it now, there's no groundbreaking sense of it, but at the time, it was a thing. Moby Dick is the best American literature, T777 says. Well, I would agree with you to an extent with a huge caveat. Moby Dick is not the best American literature. Moby Dick is one of the absolute best bits of literature that come out of New England. Same for Young Goodman Brown. What's that writer? Can't remember. can't think of his name right now. Anyway, I don't think that we had a sense of America as a culture until after the Civil War, in which case Twain was that voice. Melville was coming from the English tradition. So was the guy whose name I can't remember right now. Hawthorne, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herbert Melville, both fantastic, but both coming from the English writing tradition and very much influenced by the culture of New England, northeast United States, and do not have anything in them that are uniquely American. Whereas Twain, Faulkner, they certainly do have that. And in fact, I would say that Twain and Walt Whitman were the very first American writers, as opposed to writers who lived in what is now the United States of America. But anyway, let me get a few more of these amp questions in. Otherwise, we're just going to be talking about all this stuff. And I love that these questions come up. Hey, Topher. Sovtech MiG 100 back from the dead. Red plating when the 30 seconds switching on from standby. Any clue what's wrong here? You got something wrong in your bias supply, most likely. So don't power the amp on with the tubes in until you verify that you have like -40 to -50 volts on pin 5 in the grids of your power tubes. And if odds are you've got a lot less than that, like -10, or you may even be into the positive range. You could have leakage from the phase inverter coupling caps. You could have some other failure in your bias supply. But if you're red plating that quickly, the first thing to do is make sure that you don't have something really, really off in your bias supply, or arcing in a tube socket, etc. So don't continue to feed that thing power tubes until you get that sorted out. Hey, Scott Wara. Appreciate that very much. Very kind of you. Yeah, on the road, very of its time. Exactly, yeah. And hey, James. Demo Vox AC15 C1 arrived. Seemed like noise floor was elevated compared to other tubes amps I've heard. Checked the tubes for tightness. Seemed okay. Noise significantly improved. Replace tubes. First of all, the fact that you physically move the tubes and the noise floor improved tells me that was probable. Second of all, those things come from the factory with pretty crappy tubes. Those tubes have traveled thousands of miles to get to you, and yours was a demo one. So I would say some new tubes will probably give you the amp you were really hoping for. You can tap on them, see if any of them are pingy. But it's very, very common for those tubes that they ship with not to be great. Let's see. Hey, Chris, appreciate that. Looking to build a super reverb head for his next project. What are my thoughts on constructing to minimize reverb tank noise, given limited space in the cabinet? Well, like I said, in the first hour, someone was asking a similar question. You cannot have a traditional reverb circuit in a head unless the head is this tall, because you have to have space between the power transformer and the reverb tanks. In a combo, you get away with that. In a very tall head, you get away with that. In a traditional head, you're just going to have hum. So, as I suggested before, buy a little box that you just put a reverb tank in and set it down beneath the head or off to the side, and just have a longish RCA cable, and so you can still have the reverb tank, but you cannot get a reverb tank in a traditional head size know, and not have hum. It's physics. Nothing that you're doing right, nothing that you're doing wrong. You need some physical distance. But it's easy to make a little box. You probably get something designed for like a 2 or 3 rack unit thing, and just put the reverb tank in there. And if you want to get really fancy, you can make a little front plate with 2 RCA jacks on it you plug into. There you go. Probably find something like a used rack case, 2 to 3 rack units on Craigslist for $20 these days. Marquez is just phenomenal. Marquez and Faulkner, I think, might be two of the best novelists, prose writers of all time. Would I consider Fear and Loathing Las Vegas as Americana? It's gonzo journalism. I think it says more about Thompson and his generation than it does about the country in a lasting sense. But I've never enjoyed it, so maybe I'm biased against it. Kill a Mockingbird is great, but it's just not a sustained output from Harper Lee. It's a great one to read, and skip Go Set a Watchman. It's a horrible thing. I think her publishers were taking advantage of her old age, but in terms of to be a great novelist, you need more than one book. Your name is still not displayed. I'm sorry. Of all the Fender amps, which one is best built? The best ones are any of the reverb amps or non-reverb amps from 1963 to 1969. That's the best build period. And that could be a twin, a deluxe reverb, or Princeton. Doesn't matter. What are my thoughts on the modded mid-knob from Sweetwater on a Princeton? I don't know. I didn't know the Sweetwater was offering that, but I've been sticking a mids pot on the back of Fender reissues for 10 years now. So I should call and see if they want to pay me some royalties for that totally original idea. So yeah, I think it's a great addition. I hope that they don't charge a lot extra for it, because if I were doing that in scale, it'd be $5 per amp. David says, he's seen that I don't like rising bias cap on AB760. I don't like increasing it to 100 microfarad. It is because of charge discharge time, though. I will say that 100 microfarad is fine. You don't want to exceed that, and you're not going to get any benefit with that over 47 microfarad. Basically, here's the issue. I'm going to take you off the screen just so I have more space to use my focusy hands. We're running out of time. Let me try to do this fast. All right, so here is the time it takes to charge your bias section. And here's the time it takes to charge your output section. You never want to have a scenario where your output section is drawing, I did reverse that the first time anyway, you never want to have a situation where your output section is operating before your bias section. Because if that bias voltage is not there and is not correct, your output section can have things go bad and wrong. So you always want to have the bias, as fast as possible, so it's there whenever the power section comes on, even if the amp's powered on and just taken out of standby. Because you don't want to have it in any situation where the amp can be turned on And the power section is needing a bias reference before that bias has come up to its full negative voltage. It's always confusing saying full negative, most negative. But anyway, so you want to have as fast a charge time as possible. So you want to have, it's better to have multiple stages of small value caps, like in a Marshall or a Bassman with 10 microfarad caps separated by a resistor, and then to have, like I found a 220 microfarad or 330 microfarad cap in the bias supplies of amps in the past year. That's asking for problems. That's just giving you a much delayed bias on time. So keep it as small as possible while reducing hum. 100 microfarad is as high as I would recommend in a Fender. Thanks, RS. I hope that I'm glad I was able to answer your question. I hope that helps you find the problem, because that's a weird one otherwise. Doyle and Dickens, I enjoy them both. I think that Dickens has certain aspects that are fantastic, and in certain ways did not see everything that was happening around him because of his the times he was living in. He was at least aware of the British class system because of his own upbringing. He was, by all accounts, kind of a horrible man as far as his wife and children were concerned, but he wrote very charmingly, and some of it's surface level. I'm not sure that all of his descriptions are of real things. I think he's creating a world that his readers would find entrancing in chapter installments. He was keeping his audience hungry for more. The Potter books are written very much in a Dickensian style. Conan Doyle, I think, can someone be so influential can someone so influential be overrated? But I've gone back and read all the Doyle stuff in the last 2 years, and talk about someone totally immune to how other people live. Sherlock Holmes existed to solve problems that Doyle could imagine. I'm not phrasing this very well. The character as written is an absolute idiot in so many ways that he would be a terrible detective in any actual dangerous situation. And I don't want to go any more on that because I can't cite the things that struck me at the time. But he is an archetype of so many things to follow. Not in terms of people who are directly saying, "Yeah, I love this kind of Sherlock Holmes thing," but plot loopholes and Deus Ex Machinas, and wasn't that just convenient? And it made sense because it was, the initial ones were serialized in newspapers, so people wouldn't necessarily have the 5 chapters before at hand to say, but wait a second, I prefer Dickens to a huge degree. Tale of Two Cities is really one of the easier ones, I think. But yeah, that's why we all have different flavors of ice cream. Hey, Magnus, appreciate that. I can't give you a figure of how much loud hum or hiss is normal. It's going to depend on the amp. I would say that most people expect a normal level most people's normal is way higher than it should be. A lot of people never even know that their amp is faulty, but hum and hiss are going to vary depending on the amp and the settings used. I can't tell you more than that. Sorry. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. We're in the last minute or so. I can't tolerate Dickens. Well, he doesn't like you either, Gooden. Doyle, upper crust piffle. Yeah, as written, it is. As puzzle stories, some of them are better than others, but you know, it's. I think our sense of him having, being a century later, and all the movies that have come, most of the movies of his stuff are much better than the actual books because they're streamlined, focusing on the actual interesting bits, and have been zhuzhed up a little bit. Speaking of zhuzhing things up, thanks for hanging out with me today. You've zhuzhed my day, and I'm interested to look back at this and see how I actually opened up a window and let some light in, and see how the focus variation works as watching it back, because I thought this, where it's not just locked onto my face, might be a little more like that, but maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much. Let me sum up. Take care, y'all. See ya.